Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This video will have a lot in it. It will probably be quite quick fire. It's not one orchid, several different problems, several different solutions, all in one go. Right, I picked up some plants to deal with, and this one I picked up to deal with because it's precious to me. It's my last remaining Orangus, and then I had a look and it's actually got 3 little spikes, and it's growing new roots in many places, so that whatever problem there is with that is minor and it can wait. So that goes back up there. That's one. Right, this one is the Brassavola. Well, it's, as I said, it's a Rancovola, which is probably because the one of them was reclassified. So this first job, get it off its mount. So we cut the wires through, rescue the tag. Seems I've actually done a good one. Put that to one side. I don't need to keep it with the plant because there's no other plants here that look like that one. That's for sure. Otherwise we'd have even more problems. Now this is probably going to come off the mount quite easy. If you think of the problems we had with the Hercoglossum, see, now that's come off quite easy, but it's got the same problem. The roots have failed. All of these roots have gone. Now they may have been the roots that it went on this mount with and they've just died, but there are no active roots on this plant. There's lots of roots, but they're not active, and it's not growing any new ones, and it's not got any new growths. So I'm classing it as a failing plant. Now I don't know whether this one can be rescued, but we're certain that this is just paper. These are pointless. There's no point in leaving any of them on there. So I'm going to cut them off. First job. Now this is going to look awful when I've done this, but none of these roots are viable, absolutely none. And they're in the way if it can manage to start growing some new roots. So they serve no purpose. There's not a sign of life on any of them. So they're all coming off. And then we'll have a think about what we've got left, which is next to nothing. And again, this moss is right up in the base of the plant, but at least it's not rock hard this time. Nonetheless, it's old moss. Right, so this plant is in a state of failure. It's not growing anything, new growths or new roots. So it's no good leaving it like this. My solution for this is I'm going to spray the base with hydrogen peroxide, because where this isn't growing, it's managed to grow quite a lot of algae. Now that will kill that off and clean up the base. And then this one will go in a pot, a small pot, with bark underneath coming up, and then near the top will be quite a heavy mix of this type of sphagnum with some small bark and perlite mixed in, so not pure sphagnum. I want the base of the plant to be in contact with something that stays moist. Now that comes into a Cattleya type plant, believe it or not, that should have a wet and dry cycle. This time of year I can do that even with moss. So that's that one. We'll put that one to one side. I don't want to get it wet, because if it's going to be sprayed with the hydrogen peroxide, if it's wet, you automatically dilute the hydrogen peroxide, and when it's as low as 3%, if it gets any lower than that, it's just not going to do anything. So that's that one. This one, this is an Oncidium type, it's my Mexicoa. It's a text just arrived on my phone, which I need to go and look at because it could be important. Another problem ongoing at the moment, which I haven't discussed, but it's not time and place and everything. So this one has been sat on this mount a while, and again it's in this what was live moss once and isn't anymore. Now I've got to go careful here because there is a new growth there, but I don't think there's any this side, so I should be able to peel that off from this side. Oh, I was just going to say, why won't that come off? It's held on with fishing line, which is virtually invisible. I couldn't see it. Duh. Never mind. Let's see if we can pull all that out. There we go. Yeah, so again, this is, it's got moss around the base that's dead. Dead as a doornail, and so are the roots within it. So there's little, if any, root activity here, and no live roots, but we do have a new growth. So this one, again, I will use the hydrogen peroxide to clean up the algae. Some signs of new roots just starting, and we've got this new growth coming out here, which will obviously produce some roots. Just clean the sheath off of that new growth, and those roots can hopefully get straight into something. Now this one has done well on the mount, despite not being very good with the moss, and could have done a lot better. But this one's going back on the mount. So I'll clean the base up again. Looks there's another new growth coming here, so we've got two new growths. So we will get new roots soon. But all the old bulbs have shriveled where it's not being, the roots aren't working properly. So we'll see what we can do with this, but it is going back on a mount. So that's that one. Right, you can go down there. This is another easy one. This is BC Mackay. It's not called that anymore, it's called Brassoanthe, whatever that's supposed to be. Endearingly known in my book as BC Mackay. It's been called that for donkey's years. So it was a Brassocattleya. Now it's a something else. Because the Brasso bit's still there, but the Cattleya has become an anthe thing. Oh, you just get fed up with it all, I really do. So let's get my tag out. This is wired on. It'll probably just fall off without the wire because this hasn't grown for years. And this was one of those, well, you won't grow in a pot, we'll try you in a mount. It didn't grow on the mount either. This moss isn't completely dead. There is green. But the roots inside it are completely dead again, and black in places like the others were. And if this moss is degrading the pH dramatically, then nothing's going to grow on the plant properly because it's not feeding. So that's just a mass of dead roots. There's nothing alive there at all. That was the last new growth and it didn't develop. It got to there and stopped. So we may not be able to save this. But first job is to get that dead cane off and the stump that's next to it, because it's just going to hold things up. Just an old part of the plant there. Right, so hydrogen peroxide again, clean the algae up, and I'm just going to stick that in a pot with moss around the base and see if it will start growing. That's that one. Right, now we've got Lindleyi, and this has just been on the mount too long, I think, and the moss has gone. It didn't produce many new roots last year and only produced 2 new growths, and on a plant this size that's nowhere near enough. That should have done a lot better than that, and it didn't. So it needs to come off and have a think. But until I get it off and see what's going on, the thinking can't take place. So how easy are you going to come off? I've got a blunt knife with me this time to try and tuck down between the plant and the mount and see if it will tease it off. I think this is going to be like the Hercoglossum. It's just going to be welded to the mount with effectively a mat of dead roots. I don't think this is going to come off any sense. It's moving. Movement. Let's see if I can get my fingers up under it now. I don't want to separate the plant, don't help it. Yep, Hercoglossom syndrome. Just a rock hard base, matted roots, no new growth whatsoever, and very old moss. Now the moss in this case is the old sphagnum moss. This wasn't put on with live moss. It's just been on the mount too long, and it's been left to deteriorate and not dealt with. So, well, let's deal with it then. Again, let's try and tease out. It's not quite as bad as Hercoglossom was, but you know, it's effectively a useless root system that's serving no purpose. Probably dehydrating the plant as a consequence of the acidity that would be involved, and in addition to that, virtually no nutrients getting into the plant, I suspect, which would account for it not growing and not producing any new growths. So that, again, I'll put the hydrogen peroxide so we can just sort of get rid of the algae, not stop it getting any worse. And this should be coming into growth now. And okay, we've tried it on a mount and it did very well for a while. Now it's not doing well at all. So what I'm going to do with this one is I am going to try it in a pot. It is said that these do quite well in a pot. But it's going to have to grow some roots because it hasn't got much that's working at the moment. So again, I'll give this the, it'll have a pot full of sort of a bark base mix with some moss near the top, a bit heavy on the moss near the top, so that the moss, the base remains damp, and that should encourage some root growth. If it's possible for this to grow some new roots, that's about the only way I can think to do it. I don't want to put it back on a mount. I mean, the blooms are pendulous on this, which means the pot would have to be raised up when it's in bloom. But when it's in bloom is once a year, and the blooms last about 3 weeks if you're lucky. So it's not exactly a big deal. Sometimes I wonder why I bother with these sort. They need the rest. They need a bit of fussing, they need the extra light in the winter, and you get 3 weeks worth of blooms. Is it really worth the effort? You know, if I was going to rationalise, these would probably be at the top of the list to go to somebody else. It's a lot of fuss for little return. Right, so that's that one. Hydrogen peroxide again to clean it up a bit. That one's going in a pot. Right, so we will sort ourselves out and I'll be back. That's effectively 4 plants done in one go. They're not finished yet, obviously, but the next bit doesn't take long. It's the thought, you know, the getting them off, having a look at them and deciding what to do next. So I'll be back. Right, I've put some moss in to soak. There's only one going back on a mount, and it's going to have some moss underneath the plant this time. The only problem I've got with this is neglect, is leaving stuff on mounts too long. Well, you know, that's not the plant's fault, that's not the mount's fault, that's me. Getting lazy and just thinking, oh, it'll be fine, I'll do it next year or whatever, and it isn't fine. We all know this sphagnum moss has a limited lifespan, and during that it does very well. It does the job, but it's up to you to keep it refreshed. And as long as that's done, it's good stuff. You know, it's sterile, it's, you know, it very rarely gets any mould or anything odd on it. So this plant has suffered from dehydration, hence the shriveled bulbs. It's probably as a consequence of the moss, the old moss, also been a bit starved. And I think putting some new moss around these roots and around the base of the plant, I'm getting in quite tight to the base of the plant this time, yeah, so that new roots have got something to get straight into. Just got one little bald patch around here, which we'll just put some in. Now, prior to using this moss, I tore it up a bit because I didn't want any long straggly bits this time round, and when I come to start mixing it with bark in a minute, it'll get an even bigger tear up into smaller pieces. Right, so I'm using my thinnest wire, and I'm hoping that this isn't going to all fall off as I wrap the wire around. It shouldn't do, unless you do that and drop it, of course. It's just me. It's very early in the day at the moment. I'm not really up and running properly, but I need to get some stuff done. Just sitting around looking at it is not going to help, is it? But yeah, I'm a little bit. That was clumsy. That was just clumsy. Tuck it all back where it was, and try not to be so clumsy. I mean, I'm right-handed. I'm holding the plant with my left hand. All I've got to do is hold it, not drop it. It's not rocket science, as they say. And I'm using this wire like this on the grounds that I should be able to just uncoil this as I go. But I've tried this in the past and yeah, it's not going to work. It's going to tangle. It gets itself in knots. So I'm going to have to follow that round a few times and then cut it off. I managed to find another end now. That's not the end I was working with. I should have done this properly and cut a piece off, shouldn't I? Let's see if we can work with that, and I'll sort out the knot. It's just formed in a minute. Probably won't need any more wire today anyway. Right, so we'll come around the top of the plant now, catch those few roots, gone once round there, which has got the base of the plant. So those two are doing a good job, and now we want to go round once more to hold the lower section of moss and the associated roots. And we'll just do a quick check. Yep, that's plenty tight enough. And then we can just come round the back, grab the two ends and give them a twist, and then the pliers will do the rest. Once you get a turn in them, the holding is no longer necessary because the wire's doing the job. So we just I only brought my small pliers, but then, as I said, I wasn't expecting to do loads of mounts, just a few. Give that a twist just to tighten it up a bit. I haven't got a tag for this one, but I don't think I'm going to forget what it is. This Mexicoa, there were two examples in bloom at Burnham's. One of them was in one of the Orchid Society displays, which you've already had the video for that, so you should be able to scroll through and find it. It's the only small Oncidium type with a strange shape and strange colours. Difficult to even describe what the colours are. One of the colours is like halfway between grey and a light brown. It's a strange colour. Anyway, so that's that one done. A couple of new growths starting, which will hopefully generate some roots. And without this turning acidic, because it's fresh, it doesn't turn acidic when it's fresh. It stays reasonably pH neutral. We should start getting some nutrients into that. I don't think the old bulbs will swell up. We'll have to wait and see. So that's one done. Now everything else is going in a pot, and I haven't got the pots ready. I wanted to get the mount out of the way. So I'll break off again, sort out what size pots these are going to go in. These are going to go in tiny little pots. I'm not sure either of those will survive. This one will go in a wide shallow pot, and it'll have to just sit on the top of it. Again, I might try and wire it in place to force it down onto the media. We'll have a think about that in a minute. So again, I'll be back. Right, bit of a mixture here going on. There's some medium bark here, some grow stones, and what was left over from last time. In the bottom of this big pot is mostly medium bark, and then we move on to the smaller stuff, and with that I want some moss. But we've got to go careful here. This is for Lindley in that big wide pot, and that needs to dry quite quickly in the winter. and not stay wet for any length of time. So although I want a bit of moss in here to encourage root growth, I don't want much down in the pot. Where I want it is round the top. So we will just have a bit in with that. Have a bit more of that too. Right, so that's the bit that the roots will hopefully grow down into. Now we need the bit that the plant's going to sit on, and I think I am going to have to wire that in to hold it against this media. So this is getting in more and more of a tangle every time I use it. The problem is both ends got started instead of one of them just staying at the bottom of the coil. And then you come to use it again and you can't find either end. They're both gone now. It just keeps getting more and more tangled. Ah, there's an end. And the idea is you push that through, find out which piece is coming through. Oh, missed it again. Look. That one, I think. Gotcha. Yeah, see, and then that wraps round 2 or 3 times, so that's why it's causing a knot. It's just, it's got like that over a period of time and I haven't corrected it. That one. See if we can undo quite a few loops here. That'll get me a nice long piece then. I don't need a huge long piece for this, I just thought I'd have a go at this while I'm at it. Right, so all I'm going to do with this is poke it up through the bottom of the pot on either side of the pot to give me something to pull over the top of the plant. That's all it's for. Right, so we come up through the bottom, grab hold of it so it doesn't fall back down again, up through another hole the other side somewhere, grab hold of that. There we go, that's just something to pull down on. And what we want now, under the plant, is a thin layer of moss. This is going to be quite deep in the pot because I don't want it waggling around all over the place. So what we're going to do now is rinse that out and just spread it very thinly on the base of that plant, so that any roots that come out are going to go straight through that. This is just there to keep the base of the plant moist, and then hopefully we will generate some new roots. Has that got it all? Yeah, that'll do. Your dog needs oiling. Pathetic noise, isn't it? Absolutely pathetic. I couldn't own something like that. It drive me up the wall. Well, and the trouble is it drives the neighbours up the wall as well, which isn't very fair in the big scheme of things, you know. Right, so what we've got to do now is pull that reasonably tight, put a twist in it, and then pull it a bit tighter with the pliers. It should hold it against the media, stop having any sort of hollow bits underneath. Oh. Right, so that's got that nice and firm, and now what I'm going to do is the mix of the smallest bark and the moss I'm going to use to tuck down the sides, because I can see bare roots basically, which I don't want. So we're just going to mix up some again, break it up nice and small as it's going around the edges, and then just tuck that down the side where those bare bits are. And hopefully that will encourage some root growth. Because I keep doing this a bit at a time, I've got to go around the whole pot. I need quite a bit. Stop mucking about, get on with it. This is one of those strange situations where I know I've got to get on with this work. I'm not really in the mood to do it. I've got more, my mind is on the garden plants that should be arriving any minute. My postman usually comes somewhere between 11. It's 20 past 10 at the moment, so my postman Pat will be here within the next hour, I think, with my box. Which is more filming. Well, I think that's probably about it now. Can't see any roots now, they're all covered. And the base of the plant sat on a thin layer of moss, and I won't water that immediately because there's a fair bit of moss around the base of the plant which is wet. So I'll give that chance to just sort of soak into the bark a bit, and then we'll give it a good water and hydrate the whole thing. So that's one done. I'm surprised I didn't have a label for that, must have. Right, now a bit of small stuff in the bottom. You have to bear in mind we're moving on to Cattleya types now, so the only bit of moss I want is around the absolute base of the plant and a very thin layer. Yeah, so moving on to trying to use bigger particles of bark now, not so much of the small stuff. Right, we'll do that one first. I can't see this growing personally, but yeah, we'll just put a bit of moss around the base of it. Like that. It might grow, who knows. Orchids do strange things, but this BC Mackay, when I first got it, it bloomed and it was stunning. The blooms change colour as they age and they lasted ages. And then it just went downhill and it's never recovered. That was years ago. That happened years ago. Right, so I'm just going to plonk that in there and then put bark round it to hold it in place, not more moss. So the moss is just round the base of the plant and that's all. And then it will just be held in place by some bark. So the base of the plant won't be too wet all the time. Obviously the bark will take some of the moisture away from that moss, but there's enough there hopefully to generate some roots and possibly a new growth. That's relatively firm, I'm surprised. So that's the Mackay. You do have a tag. That's another one done. And then this one is exactly the same except for it's a bigger plant, so I'm going to take some of this out because I want it to go in deeper. Don't forget, these are tiny pots. If these start to grow, they can be moved on to bigger pots. You know, and it doesn't have to wait for a full repot. It can be lifted out and just put into a bigger pot. You know, and then if that happens before the root tips get to the edge of the pot, then those new roots, if we ever get any, will go straight into media and not hit the side of the pot. Right, so that's all that's getting. Plonk that down in. And do the same again, just get some of the larger pieces of bark around the outside to hold it in place. As I say, I don't see these two growing personally, they just don't look good. Right, so we've got some moisture around the base of the plant to hopefully encourage some roots, but not enough to keep it soaking wet. Let's see what that does. Some pretty naff. More expense. Right, so yeah, that's that one. Right, so that's basically a Cattleya type that should dry in between watering. That is probably not going to make it. Something's gone very wrong with the plant to turn it that purple colour. I hope I've made the right diagnostics. And then the BC Make, which hasn't done anything for a very, very long time and may carry on doing nothing and just die. I don't know. And then this one is the Dendrobium lindleyi, which has now got moisture around the base of the plant and a mix that's not ideal for a winter resting dendrobium, but it is ideal to get a root system going. We'll worry about getting it through the winter if it lives that long. So yes, and then our little mount that we did, which was that one. And having picked this mount up again now, I can see 3 right next to it that need doing, like now. I'm not going to do them now, I need a break. So those are the 4 we've done today. Pretty quick, you know, just get them off the mounts, have a look at them, see decide what I want to do next, which may not even be the right decision, but it's been made and it's been done. So that's those done. So we've now got to find some shelf space for them, or for the pots anyway. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.